For me, kayak fishing is simple. A boat, a paddle, a fishing rod, and unspoiled water. The fish are big. The chaos is beautiful. It's angling's addictive final frontier, and I'm hooked. I'm Drew Gregory, and this is Hooked on Wild Waters.
Drew Gregory's Hooked on Wild Waters has been brought to you by River Bassin Tournament Trail. No egos, just fun. Jackson Kayak, we make fun. GoPro, be a hero. Bending Branches, pretty, smart paddles. Orion Coolers, never lose your cool. 13 Fishing, make your own luck. Z-Man Lures, the science and art of fishing.
Why in the world am I closing a U-Haul tour when I'm about to go river bassing? Well, unfortunately, just like Wild Waters, things happen. And we were on the interstate and we blew an AC compressor in the Hooked on Wild Waters RV, but that didn't stop us. We got the Tennessee trailers here, we got our Jackson kayaks here, we hooked it up, we're heading to the river doesn't stop, the bass are still biting, so we're gonna go do this. You know, I've loved fishing the Susquehanna River, the New River, all the big rivers that everyone knows about, the trophy fisheries, but honestly, I love the small and medium-sized rivers just as much, and I'm actually on one of those today. It's definitely a trophy fishery. It's the Elk River in southwest Missouri, and honestly, I can't wait to get out there with this guy, good friend Stetson Blalock. What's up, man?
How you doing?
Doing good. So you've been on the Bassmaster Elite Series now for this past year, which is the highest level of professional bass fishing, so that's pretty amazing. And truth be told though, you've cut your teeth fishing small bodies of water just like this, just like anybody out there, creeks, rivers, ponds. So you're looking forward to getting out today, doing something a little bit different?
I am, absolutely. Anytime you can trade in the big boat, get in the Jackson kayak, get out here and drift around, see if you can't catch you a big smallmouth or big largemouth. You never know what are gonna live in these little creeks and rivers.
Exactly. Well, let's get to river bassing, man. Let's not waste any time. The Elk River is truly one of the most incredible rivers I've ever been to. You know, super clear water, and you've got a lot of pebbles, a lot of stone, very light colored tans and browns, just beautiful as the water kind of passes over them. You've also got some grass and you've got some limestone mixed in. It's just a real diverse area, and that's what I love about the Ozarks in general, super diverse. On all the episodes of Hooked on Wild Waters, you'll probably notice I've got a staple of tactics when fishing rivers. And generally, I've got a fast-moving bait, some topwater baits, buzz baits, whopper plopper, chatter baits, spinner baits, and then I've also got a soft plastic lure ready to throw back, whether it's a Ned rig or a Z-Man streak, something like that. Today is one of my favorite patterns. I was able to catch some fish on the Z-Man streak, swimming it, just straight swimming it, no twitching it, like soft plastic jerk baits. I know that's how most people fish them. Twitch, 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 let them die and swirl. Today, my favorite way to fish them is just simply throw it out there, wind it as fast as you can over the surface, maybe pop it a few times like it's a minnow jumping. And as soon as I get to this one spot at the very beginning of our float, sure enough, I'm just winding it, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, bam! There he is, that's a good one. Good smallmouth. I mean, good for Neosho. I know they don't get as big as the other ones. That's a pretty fish too. He's towing me downstream. They will be in this shallow water, as we can see. Come on, girl. Nice fish. This awesome Neosho smallmouth, 17 inches right off the bat. I couldn't be happier with the start of our day. That's a pretty fish, man. Look at that. Stay on, girl. Stay on. Oh, wow. That's a pretty smallie right there. All right, she crushed that streak. Stetson and I were just talking about how aggressive they are, and I was swimming. It looks like she's gonna go almost 17 inches, so that is a nice Neosho smallmouth, because they don't get quite as big as the other strains of smallmouth. It's really adapted itself to the smaller rivers and creeks in the Ozark area here. southwest Missouri. We'll learn more about it later. But man, what a beautiful fish. They fight so hard. This is what river bassing is all about. I mean, this is exactly why you come to southwest Missouri, to catch fish like this in beautiful clear water, the bluffs. This is amazing already, and we just got started. You can see right here, this fish has actually been caught before. It's got a sore there. Most likely it's been caught there before. So catch and release works. Thank you so much to whoever caught this fish and let it go, because I was able to enjoy a nice fight with it. And let's let it go so somebody else can catch it. Oh, that looks so good where you are up there. There's a little bit of wood. All right, this should be the cast if I can get it in the right spot. Right off that grass point. I gotta play the wind, man. This is 2 casts in a row.
That's it.
Come on, there he is. Oh, he missed it. I missed
Called
him.
it.
I missed him, but you did call it right off the grass point. So at one point, Stetson and we get into a really nice group, a real teamwork sort of group. Now, I love power fishing, moving fast and getting all the aggressive fish I can get. And Stetson is really, really good at fishing finesse baits and slowing down a little bit and taking all the fish that are a little bit deeper. But at one point I noticed he did something and I actually had a little chuckle because I've been there and I've done it too. And I know many of you guys have as well.
Look at here.
Oh shoot, got him. Nice save, Stetson. He almost wiped out on that. That's what happens when you hook a fish. It's happened to me many times. Is he still on?
Oh yeah.
He's got him, he's got him. I was really impressed with Stetson. I mean, honestly, when he went into that tree, he held it together and eventually came to a stop and of course, got the fish.
Yeah, this is my first smallmouth of the day. It's not a bad one. It's, 14 inch or so. It's kind of crazy coming to this big root wad, this big tree laying in a little deep hole there. I got turned around backwards. My bait was just kind of drifting as I was trying to turn the kayak back around. And this fish actually bit while my bait was laying dead still on the bottom. And it was kind of a crazy fight. Got in the rapids. He kind of washed me up under the trees, but I got the fish. It was a blast. I'm gonna try to catch a bigger one now. That was fun. When Drew asked me to come be a part of the show, I've been trying to get in the boat with him for a while now, and it just hadn't worked out, but finally got a chance to come up here. We're in southwest Missouri on this awesome river. We've had a great time. For me, getting in a kayak, getting out of the big boat, it changes the dynamic of the sport. We're not fishing for money, we're not fishing for a tournament, but we're still out here fishing, enjoying the creation, and it's just been a blast.
I was so impressed with Stetson. He got up on the kayak and stood up on it like he was on the deck of his bass boat. And he was flipping and pitching and making casts on the money nonstop. And obviously those are the skills that have got him where he is on the Bassmaster Elite Series. I cannot wait to see what Stetson does next year. I'm going to be pulling for him. Hopefully you guys will too. When we decided to come to the Elk River, one of the unique things was the fact that you can catch a rare species of smallmouth bass. Not really species, I guess. You'll explain that more in a minute, but maybe a strain of fish, I'm not sure. Either way, Dr. Shannon Brewer is here from Oklahoma State University, and you are going to be the one, since you're the expert, to tell me more about the cool, rare Neosho smallmouth you've been catching today.
Yeah, so Neosho smallmouth bass are actually a designated subspecies. It was designated in the 40s when being a subspecies was in vogue. I think if you asked a geneticist today, they might not go down that path. But it's actually a really controversial designation, and so scientists don't necessarily agree on what its actual status should be, but recent evidence would suggest it deserves elevation to the species level.
So it's just a different type of smallmouth bass that lives specifically where? I mean, obviously here in this river, on the Elk River, but where else does this thing live?
So it's endemic to a small portion of the Ozark Highlands ecoregion, so a small portion of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and a little bitty sliver of Kansas.
All right, sure. And real quick, one thing I learned, I recently spoke down at the American Fisheries Society conference down in Tampa, and that's where I met you. And one of the topics of the conversation was the fact that we are splitting these fish up into, different species because of the river systems they live in. And one thing that I was hearing, that actually could be a negative if our microscopes keep getting so big, and these are all separate species eventually, right? That we could consider them all endangered species, and therefore we can't fish for them at all. So it sounds like there's a negative part to having such a big microscope as well.
There can be. I like to view it as life's about balance, right? You have things that you want to preserve or conserve, at least in this case, because they're unique to populations, but we got to be careful about getting so fine that every population difference becomes a species, instead of accepting that, like you and I are different, but we're still people.
Well, we love targeting smallmouth, so hopefully we can not get it too defined, and we'll just keep them good enough where they'll stay this species and we won't mix them, but not too defined. We still want to fish for them.
That's right, that's right.
I also wanted to bring in my good friend Andrew Taylor, which I guess now I can say Dr. Andrew Taylor. So recently PhD from Oklahoma State University as well, because you've been doing research in this area on the smallmouth bass in here, as well as Neosho Smallmouth. And explain a little bit about your research and what you've learned and what you've been up to.
Right, so for my dissertation work at Oklahoma State University, I was more broadly focused on black bass conservation in general. Some of my work was with shoal bass and the Neosho smallmouth bass out here. My main focus of my research was doing a population genetic survey. So we were looking at levels of hybridization with non-native smallmouth bass, as well as where are the different populations of Neosho smallmouth bass across their range.
Right, I got you. Now, if you're doing surveys and you're getting these fish, how do you guys get the fish? What are some of the methods?
Sometimes we use seine nets, which are just like big beach seine nets that you drag across through the water. But oftentimes we're using electrofishing, which is a controlled amount of electrical current we put into the water.
So when you're doing your genetic research to try to figure out if any non-native strains of smallmouth are mixing with these Neoshos, how in the world do you get the genetics out of these fish?
Right, so once we get a targeted sample of fish from an area we're interested in, we basically do a really non-invasive procedure called a fin clip. And it's just a tiny little portion of the margin of their fin goes into a vial of preservative. In this case, it's 100% ethanol. And then we take those to a lab and we use a series of washes to extract DNA from that sample. So it's very non-invasive for each fish, and we're able to get a bunch of information about those fish. In the case of my research, we use microsatellites, which are just random repeats of DNA that we all have in our genomes. And from that, we're able to not only diagnose hybrid fish, but also be able to tell who's mating with who between river systems, which can be really important for management when we look at how we want to go about managing our different river systems. If we have different stocks of fish, we might want to manage those differently.
Definitely, right. Well, they're an awesome fish to catch. We love catching them today. I got a real nice one so far, and we're actually going to get back out there and catch some more. Thanks so much for your time, brother.
Thanks, Drew.
On top of the weather, no wind, no clouds in the sky, kind of post-frontal conditions, this river has a ton of gar and carp and suckerfish. I'm talking thousands upon thousands, and I think what the problem today was those fish were actually spooking the smallmouth and largemouth before we were getting to them, and just making it really, really tough on us to get those bigger quality bites, because those big fish don't get big from being dumb, and they know when there's something in the area that's spooked. They know there's a reason for that, and they become on guard. And then when you come by in your kayak and they can see that boat, see your shadow, and hear everything going on, it really triggers them to go and hide, and then they just kind of soil up and makes them really tough to catch.
I get out on this rocky bank, and with how clear the water is, we've got to be super, super stealthy. And being in the kayak, scaring the fish has not been working. So I get out and I see this little back cut area, and there's some fish swimming around in there. So I make a cast in there. I got this TRD on, and sure enough, wham, fish bites it. It was honestly just like red fishing. Just sucked it right up, right in front of his face. Awesome fight. It's so cool to be catching a fish, especially when the bass just are not having it. So we pulled into this little back cove here and I saw this buffalo. All right, hold up. Actually, this wasn't a freshwater smallmouth buffalo. We were really excited that it could have been. I'd seen a bunch of them in the water and I've only caught one in my life. And I haven't caught a lot of freshwater drum either, given where I grew up. And this actually was a freshwater drum. So I got a little excited, but I'm glad we got it corrected. Freshwater drum's still a pretty exciting fish to catch. Just kind of nosing on the bottom, looked just like a redfish, you know? So I threw my Ned rig in there and sure enough, she sucked right up, I caught her. And hey, nothing like a tug on the end of your line when you're doing some river bassing. So the bite slowed down a little bit. I don't care how much of a professional you are. If the fish don't want to bite, you're not catching fish.
That's exactly right.
I do want to talk to you real quick. I mean, we know each other through 13 Fishing. You know, it's our rod and reel sponsor. And you know, how long have you been with them?
Man, I've been with them since the company started. You know, it was one of those dreams I think that Jim, the owner, had, and just, you know, knowing him from previous relationships and him coming to me and asking me if I wanted to be a part of something new that was going to be huge and be the next big thing, and just giving me that opportunity, I took full advantage of it. And just to see it grow over the last 6 or 7 years to what it is now, it's unbelievable. They're innovative. You know, they don't copy anything. They come out with new stuff every year, and they continue to raise the bar in the, you know, rod and reel market for sure.
Definitely check out 13 Fishing, rods and reels, and 1-3 Fishing, their side brand of the company. I'm telling you, they are fishermen, and if you follow any of their Instagrams, those guys fish. Just like at Jackson Kayak, we all kayak and we all kayak fish. 13 Fishing guys fish, and of course, you're gonna be getting stuff from folks that are actually out there using it, so check them out. No matter what sport you participate in, if you're a kayak fisherman, you're a golfer, you're a tennis player, you're a football player, it doesn't matter. Think about this, if you won every single time, how hard would that be, first of all, to actually win every single time? But even if you did, you gotta admit, the excitement and the thrill of that sport would kind of fade away. And that's exactly what happened to us today. You know, in a weird, good way, we saw the huge fish, but we couldn't get them to bite. So that challenge and that drive and that chase is always gonna be there, because sometimes the fish do win. But that's what drives me to get up and actually fish so hard the next day. If I didn't lose those fish, I would never have the drive to catch those fish. So you can clearly see that even the challenge is yet another reason why I'm hooked on wild waters.
Drew Gregory's Hooked on Wild Waters has been brought to you by River Bassin Tournament Trail. No egos, just fun. Jackson Kayak. We make fun. GoPro. Be a hero. Bending Branches. Pretty, smart paddles. Orion Coolers. Never lose your cool. 13 Fishing. Make your own luck. Z-Man Lures. The science and art of fishing.